Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fantastic piece of history. I absolutely love this topic because it is the ultimate David versus Goliath story. 13 relatively small colonies taking on the absolute powerhouse that was the British Empire, and completely flipping the script on how countries were run. If you're prepping for your junior cert history exams, you are in the perfect place. We're going to make this incredibly simple, highly structured, and totally focused on exactly what you need to know to get top marks.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're breaking the revolution down into 4 clear buckets for your exams. 1. Causes of the revolution. 2. Course of the war. 3. A key personality study on George Washington. And 4. The consequences and Irish impact.
Let's jump straight into Section 1. Causes of the revolution. The background and anger. Let's look at exactly why these colonists got so incredibly frustrated.
To really get this, you have to remember that Britain had just won the massive, super expensive 7 Years' War against France, and they were completely broke. Their big solution? Make the American colonies foot the bill. Think about how rapidly the tension escalated here. In 1765, the Stamp Act forced a tax on official legal documents, newspapers, and, believe it or not, even playing cards. That exact same year, the Quartering Act literally forced colonists to house and feed British soldiers in their own personal homes. You can imagine how well that went over. Tension completely boiled over in 1770 with the Boston Massacre, where panicked soldiers fired into a protesting crowd, killing 5 people. Finally, the 1773 Tea Act sparked the famous Boston Tea Party, where a rebel group called the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Native Americans and dramatically dumped 342 chests of British tea directly into Boston Harbor.
Now, you definitely want to write this phrase down. No taxation without representation. This is your non-negotiable ultimate exam takeaway. The colonists weren't just mad about the physical money they were losing. They were furious about the underlying principle. Because they had absolutely zero members of parliament representing them over in London, they believed any tax forced upon them was entirely illegal.
And, it wasn't just the taxes making them angry. Propaganda was fueling the fire too. Revolutionary ideas were spreading like wildfire across the 13 colonies. One of the biggest game changers was Thomas Paine's incredibly famous booklet, Common Sense. This little pamphlet successfully convinced ordinary, everyday people that the very idea of having a king ruling over them from all the way across an ocean was absolutely ridiculous.
Moving right along to Section 2, Course of the War, from Boston to Yorktown. All that political anger is about to erupt into a full-blown shooting war.
This timeline gives us the major milestones you're going to need for any account-style question. The fighting officially kicks off in 1775 at Lexington and Concord, with what's famously known as the shot heard round the world. That leads directly to July 4, 1776, when representatives meet up in Philadelphia to sign the Declaration of Independence. That document, heavily drafted by Thomas Jefferson, famously asserted their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the war dragged on for years, especially through the brutal, freezing, and starving winter at Valley Forge in 1777. But the newly formed American Continental Army held on until their ultimate victory at Yorktown, leading to the official end of the conflict with the Treaty of Paris in 1783.
So the crucial point for your exam is understanding these 2 specific battles as the massive turning points. The Battle of Saratoga in 1777 was monumental because the American victory there actually proved to the world they had a real chance. This completely convinced France, who was definitely eager for payback against Britain, along with Spain and the Netherlands, to join the war on the American side. That foreign support directly enabled the grand finale at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. That's where the French Navy and the American Army brilliantly trapped the British commander Lord Cornwallis and finally forced his surrender.
All right, Section 3. Key personality. George Washington, leading the Continental Army. To write a completely bulletproof account for your exams, you need highly specific details, so we're zooming in on the wealthy Virginian planter chosen to lead the forces.
Examiners absolutely love it when you drop in specific, unique facts rather than just saying he was a good leader. So mention his early background as a surveyor and his vital prior military experience fighting in the French and Indian War. You'll also want to highlight his unbelievable resilience. During that horrific winter at Valley Forge, he didn't just keep his starving army from falling apart. He smartly brought in a Prussian military officer, Baron von Steuben, to professionally train his freezing troops so they'd emerge as a highly disciplined fighting force in the spring.
And all of this brilliantly illustrates Washington's genius on the battlefield. Using the word attrition is exactly the kind of high-level vocabulary that will elevate your history essays from good to great. Washington knew he couldn't always beat the massive British army in a direct head-to-head fight.
So he used attrition. He avoided massive battles that would completely destroy his forces, focused on keeping his men alive, and simply wore the British down until they were too exhausted and broke to keep fighting.
Finally, let's look at Section 4, Consequences and Irish Impact, the ripple effect. Because this massive underdog victory didn't just create the United States, it literally shook up the entire globe.
So they won. But after winning their independence, the Americans actually had to figure out how to run a country. In 1787, they wrote the U.S. Constitution, which served as their ultimate blueprint. They established a republic, meaning they'd be ruled by an elected president, not some inherited king. Crucially, they introduced the separation of powers. By mathematically splitting government power between the president, the Congress, and the courts, they ensured that no single person could ever rise up and become a tyrant like the British king they had just fought so incredibly hard to escape.
Watch how this builds into a huge global domino effect. Step 1. America proves the impossible. A massive global empire can actually be defeated by a determined colony. Step 2. This incredible realization immediately crosses the ocean and directly inspires the French to launch their own revolution just a few years later in 1789. And Step 3. These radical ideas of liberty and republicanism arrive right here on the shores of Ireland, sparking the 1798 rebellion.
Here is exactly why this matters so much to us locally, and it is a perfect connection to make in your exams. Irish nationalists looked directly at what happened across the Atlantic. Figures like Theobald Wolfe Tone and the United Irishmen saw the American success and asked a very, very dangerous question. If the Americans can break free from Britain and set up a republic where people of different backgrounds have equal rights, why can't we do the exact same thing? The American blueprint quite literally became the Irish blueprint.
Which leaves us with this final, thrilling thought to ponder as you finish up your study notes today. The American Revolution completely shattered the myth of invincibility surrounding the great empires of the world. If 13 scrappy, totally underfunded colonies could pull off the ultimate historical upset and entirely rewrite global history, who was going to be next? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep this structured roadmap in mind for your junior cert prep, and happy studying.